يحيى خذ الكتاب بقوة وآتيناه الحكم صبيا إذ قال الله يا عيسى إني متوفيك ورافعك إلي محمد رسول الله.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Surah Al-Israa, a surah that was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca, revealing to the Prophet ﷺ foundation principles and matters of the deen, the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the belief in the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the destiny, the belief in the hereafter, the reality of this life versus the hereafter, something that many of the human beings are confused about. And there's no way that the questions of many of the human beings will be answered unless the belief in the hereafter is in place. And we get to know about that from the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us the ways on the face of earth, the way of how the truth versus falsehood is established on the face of earth, what's going to happen to the people after this life, the levels of people, the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala behind the fact that there are people richer than others, stronger than others, and so on. All of that is explained in the Qur'an and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Inshallah ta'ala we'll go through verses 18 to verse number 22 from Surat Al-Israa. From verse number 18 to verse number 22 from Surat Al-Israa. So let's start with verse number 18 that give us the comfort and the ease and the ability to look forward and to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. Verse number 18, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, من كان يريد العاجلة عجلنا له فيها ما نشاء لمن نريد ثم جعلنا له جهنم يصلاها مذموما مدحورا. Which means, whoever should desire the immediate, we hasten for him from it what we will to whom we intend. Then we have made for him hell, which he will enter to burn, censured and banished. And this will be continued. So this verse, it's talking about those who are condemned when they only intend or they desire this worldly life. من كان يريد العاجلة. Men refers to human beings. So whoever كان يريد العاجلة, يريد, intend, desire, this is their intentions, this is their ultimate goal of this life. Al-Ajila, as you see in the translation, the immediate. Al-Ajila, it's referring to this worldly life. This worldly life is the immediate one. And Al-Ajila comes from Al-Ajala, or something that, when something is in haste, something that is present, the one that comes before something else, where we live in this life. So this is the immediate one. This is what is given to us in this life. This is basically the life that we live on the face of earth. So we have this life versus the hereafter. After this life there is the everlasting life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of everything. He's the one that created this worldly life, and He's the creator of the afterlife. And there's differences between this life and in the hereafter, and it's all explained in the Qur'an. One of which is, this life is a test. This life is nothing but a test for the human beings. And people are given the ability to think, to make decisions, and books are revealed, messengers are sent for people whether to choose to be righteous versus to be evil. And the matter has been made very clear to them, warning, giving glad tidings of what exactly going to happen in the Day of Judgment, in the hereafter, which is an everlasting one. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the hereafter is basically two places. The Jannah after the Day of Judgment, after the judgment among the people. There's either Jannah, paradise, everlasting desires to be fulfilled for an everlasting life, versus the hereafter, versus the hellfire. The Jannah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepared for the believers. And the qualities of the believers are mentioned clearly in the Qur'an. Versus the hellfire, which is the place of the people of disbelief, they will be in it forever. Or the sinners, if they do not repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will spend some time in the hellfire before they enter the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the condition that they died in the state of the Tawheed, they died in the state of Al-Islam. So knowing this is of course a great subject in the Qur'an, and we need to know the details of that and to reflect upon this with our hearts so that our actions would follow. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is stating in this verse, whoever intend al-ajila, whoever wants this world and that's it. Someone might say, but we all want this world. We all want the beauty of this world. This is something that is inserted in us. We are created with it. This is instinct. Every human being, they want to live a goodly life. There's nothing wrong with that. But the verses, as we will see the next verse, it's talking about this world versus the hereafter. So when they're both in the same context, then things has to be different. So that means prepare yourself. You will be tested with regards to the hereafter versus this world. Would you choose this world and then as a result of ruining your hereafter, or would you choose the hereafter even if it affects your comfort of this life? This is how simple the matter is. So as far as having the intentions or having the desire for this world, it's a natural thing. But does it make you sinful? Does it make you heedless, disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, harming others, abusing others, wronging others? You know, if this is what basically the life of a person, he is basically choosing this immediate one over the hereafter. And for those who choose the hereafter, they would still get the benefits of this worldly life. They would still breathe the air and eat what is lawful and enjoy what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted for them, but they do things in the right way. They follow the commands of Allah. And if they follow the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would have the best of this life and in the hereafter, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised the believers. من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فلنحيينه حياة طيبة. That whoever do righteous good deeds, whether it's male or female, we will give them a goodly life, and they will be given the best of the rewards in the hereafter. The goodly life is not necessarily what people as a result of their ignorance would define. It is not necessarily that you will be the richest man on the face of earth, or you would get this position or that position, but you'll have a goodly life, the life of contentment, the life of enjoying what Allah permitted for you to enjoy, and this is all by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what the verse is condemning clearly are those who are so much immersed to this worldly life, they don't want nothing beyond it. They don't seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hereafter. So the verse says, Man kana yuridu al-ajila, whoever wants al-ajila, the immediate one, in an exclusive way, what's going to happen to them? عَجَّلْنَا لَهُ فِيهَا مَا نَشَاءُ. عَجَّلْنَا is the verb of al-ajila, which means we will hasten for him, لَهُ فِيهَا, in it, for him, مَا نَشَاءُ لِمَن نُرِيد, whatever we will, to whom we intend. That means he will be given from this immediate world that he intended so much, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed for whoever he intends subhanahu wa ta'ala. So at the end, you won't get more than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for you. So it doesn't matter whether you intend and you desire this worldly life or you don't, you will get what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for you. Because to talk about human beings, those who have intellect and reason, everybody take the means. So we're talking about people, those who have intellect. We're not talking about crazy people, insane, those who have insanity. This is not, they're not being addressed by the Qur'an and by the deen of Allah. The excuse they have their own excuse. The people of intellect, which is the normal human beings, right? They would understand this. They would take the means. Everybody take means in this life, right? So if someone says, if it's decreed by Allah that I would eat, the food will fly and enter my mouth, and therefore I'm not going to do anything about eating or drinking, that person is insane. So the verses are not addressing those who are insane. So everybody take the means. But the means, some means are not permissible. Can you steal from someone to eat and drink and to have provisions? Of course not. It's haram. It's forbidden. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade that. And the like of that of which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade. So the point here is your desire of this world, which everybody has, it does not bring to you the provisions. So if you want provisions from Allah, if you want to be wealthy, the desire by itself doesn't work. Everybody take the means. Everybody wants to be wealthy. Everybody wants to be healthy, and so on. But to believe in the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to focus on what's your priority in this life. So the verse direct our hearts to really be attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See how powerful it is. عَجَّلْنَا لَهُ فِيهَا مَا نَشَاءُ لِمَن نُرِيدُ. We will give him in haste for whoever we will, for whoever we intend. So where is the will of the human beings? We have a will, of course, right? But did the desire that you want to have something provided for you, what is decreed for you? No. It's all by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as a rule, لا ينال ما عند الله إلا بطاعته. You do not attain what's with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except by being obedient to Allah. Makes it so easy for us. This is like a remedy to our hearts. You know, the matter is so easy. You don't need to panic. You don't need to be terrified in your heart when it comes to provisions and means and so on. Take the physical means and know that everything is by the will of Allah. You have a purpose in this life. You're not created to be like the cattle, eating and drinking and that's it. You're created to worship your Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're created to be an obedient servant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doing the obligations, staying away from haram, fulfilling the rights of others. And knowing this and being upon this, you will take the means to work, to earn, to study. All of these things are beautiful, but with this foundation of understanding what this life is all about. And having the contentment and the strong belief in the heart that after all, you would only get what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed for whoever He intend subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's based on the wisdom of Allah, the power of Allah, the knowledge of Allah. So relax basically and fulfill the duties that is upon you in this life. So whoever only desires this world and nothing beyond this world, what's going to happen to them? ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَا لَهُ جَهَنَّمَ. They will get whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for them in this life. So therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides for the most wicked, for the righteous ones, for everybody. But those who are wicked and evil and they only desire this worldly life, what's going to happen to them in the day of judgment? ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَا لَهُ جَهَنَّمَ. Then we will make Jahannam, the hellfire for them. يَصْلَاهَا. He will burn in it. مَذْمُومًا, censured. مَدْحُورًا, banished. This is the affairs in the day of judgment. ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَا. Who's the one that would make Jahannam for them? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The verse from the beginning to the end, it's basically making the hearts of the believers very strong upon the fact that everything is by Allah. So who's the one that would make them burn in the hellfire? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He's the most just, He's the most merciful because of their actions. ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَا لَهُ. For him Jahannam that Allah created. يَصْلَاهَا, meaning they will be burned in it. مَذْمُومًا مَدْحُورًا. الذم is when someone is censured, when someone is accused of something. And that's the opposite of alhamd, when someone is praised. So when you praise someone versus when you censure someone, when you condemn someone. So the people of the hellfire, they will be censured, they will be condemned, they will be cursed, and it's an everlasting one. Madhura, dahr is when someone is kicked out, banished, banned from something. So they will be kicked out of the mercy of Allah. This is how the people of the hellfire, they will be censured, they will be condemned, right? And they will be kicked out of the mercy of Allah. All of that is because of what? Because man kana yuridu al-ajila. Whoever desires only this worldly life. This is the creator of the heavens and earth. He is conveying that to us. So what does that mean? We need to apply this verse and the next one so that our life will fall into the right place. And don't worry, you won't be deprived of any of the goodness of this life. And we will see that, we'll hear that inshallah ta'ala right after this in the next verse, but right after the break. So stay with us inshallah.
Muhammadur Rasulullah. محمد رسول الله.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We're going through verses in Surat al-Israa from verse number 18 to verse number 22. We just heard verse number 18. And you have to know what's in 18 so that you can build then the meanings is completed in verse number 19 and 20 and so on. It's a context. Verse number 18 talked about those who desire only this worldly life. This is their ultimate desire. Their desires do not go beyond that. That means they did not worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or if they did not seek rewards from Allah in the hereafter. So nothing for them in the hereafter except the hellfire. And they will be condemned and censured in the day of judgment, and they will be banished and kicked out of the mercy of Allah. So we talked about that. Then the next verse talks about the other group of people. If you're not supposed to only desire this world, what should you do? Listen to what your Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, says to us as a creation of Allah, as human beings that we need to fulfill this humbleness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in verse number 19, وَمَنْ أَرَادَ الْآخِرَةَ وَسَعَى لَهَا سَعْيَهَا وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَأُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ سَعْيُهُمْ مَشْكُورًا. But whoever desires the hereafter and exerts the effort due to it while he is a believer, it is those whose effort is ever appreciated by Allah. So we have to listen carefully. وَمَنْ أَرَادَ الْآخِرَةَ. And whoever intends, whoever desires al-akhirah, the hereafter, the last day, this afterlife. So we have irada, we have a will, we have a desire, whether to desire this worldly life or whether to desire the hereafter. This verse 19, as we see, it does not say وَمَنْ أَرَادَ الْعَاجِلَةَ وَالْآخِرَةَ. It does not say whoever desire this world and the hereafter. We all desire, we all have desires in this world. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to desire religiously the hereafter. Only the hereafter. Does that mean it makes us not human because we don't have any desire? We won't have any desire for this world? It doesn't mean that. But you desire the rewards in the hereafter. You desire with your actions what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepared for the believers in the hereafter. You live in this life doing actions, seeking rewards from Allah, not in this world, but seeking rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hereafter, to be saved from the hellfire and to enter the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you're focused upon this, you desire the hereafter, because there is the hereafter, it's an everlasting one, it's not too difficult to be convinced. And as mentioned before, what is this world versus the hereafter? This world is what? For a person living 80, 90 years. And then this is compared to what? It's compared to an everlasting life. When you compare them, what is the 80 and 90 years? It's called zero. It's nothing. It's not 80 and 90 even, because anything compared to infinity is zero. Right? So as if we are basically nothing whatsoever in this life. It's a very short life compared to the hereafter. But this very short life is so precious, because it determines by the will of Allah how the everlasting life will be. So that means don't waste this life. It is not worth it to waste these counted breaths that we take on the face of earth, because we're talking about the hereafter, which is an everlasting one. So this is supposed to be very easy for those who have intellect and reason. And that's why, as mentioned, the Qur'an does not address those who are foolish, address those who have reason and intellectual. So whoever desires, this is how we desire the hereafter, then definitely we should definitely desire the hereafter. And وَسَعَى لَهَا سَعْيَهَا. The second thing is وَسَعَى لَهَا سَعْيَهَا. And he worked for the hereafter, exerted himself the effort due to the hereafter. This effort that is due for it. وَسَعَى لَهَا سَعْيَهَا. See, in the translation you have exert and effort, right? But here it says سَعَى سَعْيَهَا, which is the same verb. And a sa'i is when you go to somewhere diligently. That means requires effort, requires that you exert yourself. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stated in the Qur'an, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا نُودِيَ لِلصَّلَاةِ مِنْ يَوْمِ الْجُمُعَةِ فَاسْعَوْا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Or you who believe, if the call in the day of Jumu'ah is called, فَاسْعَوْا, go to the remembrance of Allah. Leave whatever trade you're in, whatever you're busy with, and go exert yourself, be diligent, focus on what you're going to, and that is the Salah, Salatul Jumu'ah. So living in this world, we need to exert ourselves. What's the hereafter is it's for. The hereafter has a right upon us. You want to be successful in the hereafter? This is your future. When they talk to the people about your future, establish your future, have a strong future, all of this, what's future in this life? The future in this life is the hereafter. Because we all shall leave this world and die at a certain point, and all of what we did and all what we built and amassed and all of that, we would leave that behind. Yes, sure, definitely take the means and be happy and content in this life. But it's a foolish thing to think that this life is going to be forever, because it's not. So build the hereafter, you won't lose this life because it's all continuous. So وَسَعَى لَهَا سَعْيَهَا, that the hereafter has rights upon us. If you want to be among those who are successful in the hereafter, there has to be some diligent work to be done against our own desire to choose always the hereafter over this life if there's a test. And the meaning of this is just simple example. If you're a Muslim and you have, the adhan of the salah comes, like say, for example, adhan of Salatul Jumu'ah or Salatul Fajr or any salah. This is an obligation. We all know that these are 5 obligatory salah upon us. And the adhan is calling us to al-falah, hayya al-falah. Come to the salah, hayya al-salah, and then come to the success. The success of this life? No, the success of the hereafter. So now this is a test. You're doing a business transaction, you want to sleep and you desire to sleep, whatever occupation that you're in, now the command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to seek rewards from Allah in the hereafter. Can you go establish the salah for some worldly benefit so that people would see that, mashallah, you're making salah, so they will trust you and will go to your business? That's not a valid reason. You're not working for the hereafter. Seek rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only in the hereafter. وَسَعَى لَهَا سَعْيَهَا. Take in the means for the hereafter. Seek rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Fulfill the commands of Allah the way that Allah commanded, not the way that you would desire. He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that decreed upon you when to pray, what specific times. He subhanahu wa ta'ala the one that ordered you to fulfill this command. So exert yourself. And you will be tested whether to choose this materialistic desire versus the hereafter. And it's all easy in the capacity of each and every one of us. So this is something to expand on it and to reflect upon it, and verses that we need to always think about. Desiring the hereafter, exerting oneself to be saved in the hereafter by following the example of the Prophet ﷺ. So this is the physical action. وَهُوَ مُؤْمِن, while he is a believer. So that means that this believer, there is no benefit for them. If they are disbelievers, if they do all kinds of work, it's not going to benefit them in the hereafter. So وَهُوَ مُؤْمِن, while he is a believer, believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one worthy of worship, believing in the pillars of al-Iman, a Muslim, someone that submitted himself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fulfilling these obligations, staying away from haram, while being in the state of al-Iman. So all of the different actions, if it's not upon the foundation of al-Iman, is of no benefit. Only benefits the person in this worldly life, but there's no benefit in the hereafter. What's then for them? فَأُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ سَعْيُهُمْ مَشْكُورًا. These are the people that their sa'i, their exerting themselves, their efforts will be mashkuran, will be appreciated. And a shukr is to be grateful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a shakur. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most grateful. That means He subhanahu wa ta'ala would reward the people far more than what their actions are all about. It's all simple actions, and the reward is an everlasting joy in the Jannah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepared for the believers. So, and it shows that their sa'i, their efforts, their struggle that they went through in this life is not wasted. فَأُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ سَعْيُهُمْ, their actions, their efforts, mashkura, will be appreciated, will be rewarded in the best reward. And compare this to what happened to the previous ones in the previous verse. Those who desired this immediate life, they will enter the hellfire, and they will be burned in the hellfire, مَذْمُومًا مَدْحُورًا, censured, condemned, and they will be kicked out of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So choose which one you want to be upon. If you choose the second one, you won't lose anything in this life, because as we heard in the first verse, If you desire this world, you would still only get what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed for you, for whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intend the matter to be for. So what else you can do? Nothing. So basically, it's all in the heart. Desire the hereafter, exert yourself to be obedient to the commands of Allah. It's not up to you, it's based on the deen of Allah. And the deen of Allah, because it's from Allah, it fits perfectly what the human beings they're upon, and what if they exert themselves to fulfill the commands of Allah, it's in their capacity. They won't lose any of the goodness of this life as long as they follow the commands of Allah. So therefore, it's only one decision for a person of wisdom. If he reads these two verses, he would find himself only given himself one decision: have the desire of the hereafter. Because even if you want to desire this world, who owns this world? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will only get from it what He willed for you. So desire the hereafter and exert yourself to fulfill the commands of Allah, and as it's clearly stated in the Qur'an, who are the successful people in the hereafter, and fulfill the matter of al-Iman, be a believer. Their sa'i, your effort, would not be wasted. It will be treated with gratefulness, with rewards that nobody can ever imagine. Then the next verse, verse number 20, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes how both parties, both groups, those who desire this world versus the hereafter, what's their affairs? Verse number 20, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كُلًّا نُمِدُّ هَؤُلَاءِ وَهَؤُلَاءِ مِنْ عَطَاءِ رَبِّكَ وَمَا كَانَ عَطَاءُ رَبِّكَ مَحْظُورًا. Which means, to each category we extend to these and to those from the gift of your Lord, and never has the gift of your Lord been restricted. كُلًّا نُمِدُّ, both categories, the people, those who desire this worldly life, and those who desire the hereafter. And we know what the affairs of both of them. They are both from Allah. Numiddu, that means we will extend, we will give. You know, al-imdad is when someone is given provisions. And even they use the same word for the armies. You know, the armies, if there are lots of people and they're, going out for an expedition or somewhere, there's a unit by itself for providing for the army food and ammunitions and all of this. So they're always the constant, giving them and making sure the logistics that needs to be given to them. So if a person desired this worldly life only, or desire the hereafter, whatever they are given as a result of that, it's all from Allah. كُلًّا نُمِدُّ هَؤُلَاء. All of them, everybody, they're given by the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَهَؤُلَاءِ مِنْ عَطَاءِ رَبِّكَ, and all of that, هؤلاء, those both categories, and it's all from عَطَاءِ رَبِّكَ, from what your Lord provided for them. Al-'ata' is when someone is given something from the most rich, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He subhanahu wa ta'ala the most rich. Nothing decreases from the treasures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whether it's to stop here or there, that means everything is by the permission of Allah, is all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, this imdad, or when someone is given, even if a person is not given much, the believers, they see everything in this life as ata from Allah, as something that is given to them by Allah. So, to the human beings, as they always say, al-man', or if you're deprived of something, if you are a believer, if you're exerting yourself for the hereafter, this in itself is ata. This is in itself is giving. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you the fact that He withheld something that is harmful for you if you are a believer, if you're exerting yourself to fulfill the commands of Allah. So everything from Allah is ata. Everything from Allah is giving. Allah is giving everyone according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best of them. And that's why the end of the verse makes it very clear, but we'll go to break and come back inshallah ta'ala to continue that. So stay with us inshallah.
محمد رسول الله محمد رسول الله.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Welcome back, and we're still in verse number 20 with regards to the two categories of people, those who desire this world only versus those who desire the hereafter. And those who desire the hereafter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned something extra for them, because they need to exert and put the effort in seeking the hereafter, that means it doesn't kind of fits their desire in the immediate sense. They need to exert themselves, because the immediate one will keep on pulling them towards it. While they are believers, then their actions will be appreciated. They will get the best of the rewards, and everything, whether the first category or the second category, they're all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore everything is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in the sense of ata. It means we're always given. So don't think that you have been, something has been withheld from you. No, what you consider as being withheld from you, it's something that Allah gave you. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made you poor while you're taking the means, the halal means, actually what happened is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you this. This is a given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for you to be patient. And He had withheld from you maybe evil, because everything is by the decree of Allah. And if someone is given wealth, this is also given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it doesn't mean that by itself means that you are a righteous person or a wicked person. It all depends on one's actions, how we react to whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us. That's why the end of the verse says, وَمَا كَانَ عَطَاءُ رَبِّكَ مَحْظُورًا. That the ata, the fact that your Lord is giving, and that's why it says gift, because al-ata is not something that you earned, it's something that is given to you. So don't think that it's because you earned it. No, it's given to you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that has never been restricted. No one can restrict or withhold what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for you to have. Right? As the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam to Abdullah ibn Abbas when he was a child, وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْأُمَّةَ لَوْ اجْتَمَعَتْ عَلَى أَنْ يَنْفَعُكَ بِشَيْءٍ. Know that, have this creed, this belief, this certainty, conviction, that if the entire nation, the entire world get together to benefit you with something, لم ينفعوك بشيء إلا بشيء كتبه الله عز وجل لك. They would not benefit you except with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recorded for you. And the opposite is also true. If they all get together to try to take something from you, they won't be able to do it unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decree for it to happen. So what that means, make your heart fully relying and depending upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. It's all from Allah. Human beings are nothing but means. So nobody can restrict the ata, the gifts from Allah. And the gifts from Allah, whether a person is pleasing to Allah or not, this is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to us in this life. The next verse, verse number 21, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, then give us the insights and to reflect upon these meanings. انظر كيف فضلنا بعضهم على بعض وَلَلْآخِرَةُ أَكْبَرُ دَرَجَاتٍ وَأَكْبَرُ تَفْضِيلًا. This is what the next verse is saying, which means انظر, that means look. كَيْفَ فَضَّلْنَا بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. How did we, فَضَّلْنَا, made some superior over the others. How some are more virtue than the others. How the levels of the people in this world. Some people are of a higher level than others, materialistically. Some people are much richer than others. Some people, they look maybe good looking more than others. Some people are tall, some people are short. Some people, they live longer than others. People are not the same. And they are given things according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for them. They did not choose. He did not choose to be black or white or so. He did not choose, even though everybody take the means for the most part. They don't choose really to be rich or poor. Everybody's taking the means for the most part. But it's the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The same thing how you look. When it comes to how long you're going to live on the face of earth. Everybody wants to live forever. But everyone will face what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for them. So everything is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why it says, انظر كيف فضلنا. How we chose some over the other. How we made superior one over the other. And this is at-tafdeel, something extra is given to one versus the other. In this worldly life, how people are different. You see that clearly. And then it takes us to the hereafter by saying, وَلَلْآخِرَةُ أَكْبَرُ دَرَجَاتٍ وَأَكْبَرُ تَفْضِيلًا. And by Allah, for sure, the akhirah, the hereafter, akbar, greater in darajat, in levels. And وَأَكْبَرُ, and greater in the tafdeel, in the virtue, in the superiority. So in the hereafter, people are in different levels. In Jannah, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said, For one category of good, of people of righteousness, the mujahideen, those who struggle for the sake of Allah, those who fought for the sake of Allah, only for them there are 100 levels in Jannah. 100 levels in Jannah only for them. They're not all the same. So you can imagine the rest of the believers. And between one level and the other is like between the heavens and the earth. And every verse in the Qur'an, when a person memorize it, it's a level in Jannah, as it's mentioned also in the authentic hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So there's so many levels in Jannah, in paradise, and there's so many levels that goes down in the hellfire. People in the hellfire are not in the same level. But each one in Jannah, in paradise, will think that he is the one that received the ultimate desire. No one is better than him, because nobody in Jannah will feel less or inferior or feel bad or so. And everyone in the hellfire, because of the punishment, will think that he is the worst person in the hellfire. And this is darajat, levels. And a daraja is when you go up the stairs. Everyone is in a different level. And وَأَكْبَرُ تَفْضِيلًا, and the hereafter is much greater in the tafdeel, the superiority, the virtue, and it's all depends on what? On the actions of the people. It did not depend on what Allah gave people in this life. In this world, as it's mentioned in the beginning of the verse, انظر كيف فضلنا بعضهم على بعض, see how we made some superior over the others, with, as we said, with looks, physical appearance, with wealth and all of that. All of these things in the hereafter, it's not going to be the criteria for people to be of higher levels or low or superiority or not. It's their actions. So if you say, as an extreme example, someone is extremely poor, but he was obedient to Allah and a believer, and he exerted himself to be obedient to Allah, and he's a believer, versus someone that is the richest man on the face of earth, but it happened to be someone is a disbeliever and follow the desires of this world. So that person, the rich one, was given in this world all kinds of gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And versus the other one, the believer, was deprived from all kinds of good things. And it's all by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as it's mentioned in the previous verse. In the hereafter, who will be superior? The one that was righteous. Why? Because he acted upon what is given to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way that Allah wants from him. Versus the one that was given all kinds of materialistic things in this life, and he did not obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he was not a believer, would be in the hellfire. So that superiority did not benefit him. So what really matters is our actions. And it's going back again to the actions, while being in the state of belief. وَسَعَى لَهَا سَعْيَهَا وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ, exerting oneself with actions while being a believer, the conditions for the deed to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that also in the sense of following the way the Prophet ﷺ, not just وَسَعَى لَهَا, not just acted for the hereafter, but سَعْيَهَا, what it ought to be. It's not for anyone to decide, it's by following the example of the Prophet ﷺ, وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ, while he's a believer, which is al-ikhlas, sincerity in actions. And then the set of verses ends beautifully with this verse, verse number 22. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا تجعل مع الله إلها آخر فَتَقْعُدَ مَذْمُومًا مَخْذُولًا, which means do not make with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala another ilah. Do not make with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala another deity to be worshipped, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no deity to be worshipped. He is the only one worthy of worship, but it's the human beings that make up these things. So do not make with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ilahan akhar, someone that is to be worshipped besides him. فَتَقْعُدَ مَذْمُومًا مَخْذُولًا, otherwise you will sit, this is going to be your affair, otherwise you will become censured and forsaken. So فَتَقْعُد, al-qu'ud is when you sit somewhere, which basically refers to your affairs, that your affairs will be in such a way that you will sit. That means this is going to be your affair, your norm, your everlasting misery will be what? Here it says مذموما, as it's mentioned previously in verse number 18, مذموما, from a them, someone censured, someone that is condemned, versus someone that is praised. مخذولة, al-khudlan is for someone to be forsaken, when someone is let down. And that's different than madhura. What's the difference between madhura and makhdhula? Madhura, someone that is kicked away from the mercy of Allah. He's detained, he's away. Makhdhula, when someone let down, someone had hopes for something and his hopes were all in vain. You know, when someone worship other than Allah, they might have hopes from these idols that they worship besides Allah. If someone worshipped a prophet of Allah, worshipped Jesus alayhi salam, worshipped, an idol, an image, a person in the grave, so they were hoping that these things that they worship besides Allah, that would benefit them, would save them in the hereafter. And then they come into the hereafter and they let them down. Because these are all slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're obedient to Allah. They never commanded the people to worship them besides Allah. So when they're having so much hope, this is false hope. And then in the hereafter they are let down. This is what al-khudlan is. When you let someone down. And this by itself is one of the most severe of punishment. And to the level of sins also, as the Prophet ﷺ stated upon those who would be let down in the Day of Judgment, when they would be looking for the Prophet ﷺ to take a drink from the hawd, from the basin that the Prophet ﷺ will be given to give people drinks from his ummah. And the Prophet ﷺ told us, look for me. And you need to seek that from the Prophet ﷺ in the Day of Judgment. When he said, أَنَا فَرَطُكُمْ عَلَى الْحَوْضِ, I'll be ahead of you, waiting for you. So some people will be taken away from the Prophet ﷺ, and he would say, Ashabi, Ashabi, my companions, my people. And it will be said to the Prophet ﷺ, إِنَّكَ لَا تَدْرِي مَا أَحْدَثُوا بَعْدَكَ. You do not know what they have introduced after you. So the Prophet ﷺ would say, سُحْقًا سُحْقًا لِمَنْ بَدَّلَ بَعْدِي. Perished away for those who have changed after me. So these people are let down. They had hope and they were let down as a result of their evil actions. So, and how significantly that is mentioned with associating partners with Allah. لا تجعل مع الله إلها آخر فتقعد مذموما مخذولا. Do not make with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala partners. Do not worship other than Allah. Worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, otherwise you will be condemned, you will be censured, and you will be makhdulan. That means you will be let down, you will be forsaken, and that's a severe punishment, and that means they will be into the hellfire as a result of this evil sin. There are so many different things to be said in these verses, and really it just directs us to the right understanding of this life. The Qur'an is miraculous for us to reflect upon it. If we truly listen to every word that is being said in these minutes that we spend discussing and making the tafsir of these verses, this will change our life. We will understand exactly what this life is all about and what the hereafter, and it will keep us steadfast upon the deen of Allah, and then we would learn more and more of how then we can act upon the hereafter and seek rewards from Allah, and not to be panicking or being terrified or being worried of what people are worried about and falling into these miseries that humanity are upon, except for those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them these remedies and these means of purification of the heart to be steadfast upon the deen of Allah, the tawheed of Allah, the oneness of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that brings all kinds of good things and good deeds in this life, the best of this life and the hereafter. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the proper understanding of the reality of this life and in the hereafter, and to make us among those who are steadfast till they are returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to gain and to be among the people of Jannah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
إلا الذين تابوا وأصلحوا وبينوا فأولئك أتوب عليهم وأنا التواب الرحيم.
فادعوا الله مخلصين له الدين ولو كره الكافرون.
يا زكريا إنا نبشرك بغلام.
يا أيها النبي إنا أرسلناك شاهدا